R&B is the podcast. Here with Russ and Blake. Oh, and just like we're gonna tell you something, the knowledge you'll take. It's been a long time recording, so you know we're here for you. Well, let's get to work. Welcome back to R&B Podcast with Russ and Blake. Today, we're going to talk about a little something. Last week, we, went down the rabbit hole of coaching, and we got some good feedback per usual. And today, we're going to continue to build off upon our topics the same way that we have been over the past few weeks. Identity. Who am I? Who are you? Who is we? We're going to talk about it. So identity, the definition is what to you, Russ?
Wow. Well, you posed the question, who am I? That, to me, has been one of the most important questions for me to ponder upon, for me to ask myself. So without, looking at the definition, to me, identity is the characteristics that you feel describes yourself, the characteristics that you use to describe somebody else. I believe that is past, present, and future that comes into our identity. What you've done in the past, what you feel like today, and what you feel like you'll be tomorrow when you wake up, those constants that you identify with. I feel like those are the things that constitute our identity.
Yeah. So is identity whatever the individual decides to construct it as, or do we all have a concrete identity that's either waiting to be discovered more in detail or built upon?
I think that it is a little bit of both, because I think that what you feel about yourself without somebody else telling you first has a lot to do with your identity. I believe that the philosophies that you align your belief with have a lot to do with your identities, and nobody told you to do that. Well, maybe they did, but you might have came to your own beliefs. And I think that has to do with your identity. But then I also think that you were described before you even got here. I got my first grade progress report, and there's an ethnicity section, Black or African American, so I was already identified that way before I had to say. So I think that it's both how you see yourself, but also how society and the culture around you, what words they've placed on you.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then I just got to say the inspiration for this topic is behind the haircut. Those of you who are tuning in on YouTube, you see it. All the other platforms, in case you didn't know, I had locks down past my shoulders that have been chopped off for good. And I felt like I was identifying with my hair. And for a while, that was okay to me. Like, people call me Rasta, man, especially when I went to Jamaica. Shout out to Hamza at his gym. He called me Rasta. And it was cool because I like the Rastafarian lifestyle. I appreciate that religion and their beliefs. And, it helped me develop my identity and develop my spirituality and my I guess my way of promoting one love. And coming to the point where I was ready to cut them off was difficult, because one, I've done it before and I said I wouldn't do it again. I thought I was going to die with my dreadlocks. And then I had my daughter last year, and it changed my perspective on everything, every single little thing in my life. And I have so much to be grateful for, and I have so many things that are so important to me and that I care about. And then I did not want my hair to be something that was taking away from the care that I could attribute to other things in my life that were so significantly more important. And there's so many things that we can lose at the blink of an eye, the snap of a finger. And we have to ask ourselves, which of those things would we truly be devastated about losing? Like, what is really important to us and what makes us as a person? And I didn't want my hair to be that. So it was kind of a very abrupt decision that I had to make, because I would have talked myself out of it. Like, my wife wanted to take pictures, this and that, tell people. I was like, no, I just got to go to the barbershop right now and take care of this, because like I feel it in me. And then another, I guess, detail on that was I had used this product that kind of irritated my scalp and stuff. I was like, man, I gotta take care of me. Like, the hair's not worth me having these issues with my scalp going on and all this. So let's just get rid of it, start fresh, and make sure that I'm feeling good. And I felt like that was God talking to me, that it was time to part with the hair that I had had for 5 years, that so many people know me by. And I spent the next like 3 days for like people not recognizing me. I went to golf with my friends, people didn't recognize me. I went to work, people didn't recognize me. And it was a cool experience. It's like being the new kid, and I've built this reputation, and people know me in whatever ways they do, and now it's just like a clean slate. And so as far as my identity, I have spent this past year really, I guess, honing in on what's been important to me. And the hair didn't make the cut. Simple as that.
Man, that's real. It's very interesting because, when we identify with things that can be taken away from us, it always brings you back to that question of, well, who am I truly then? If one day I can have something I identify with and it's gone the next day, then what does that mean about identity?
Right, exactly. And then so that's a good way to segue into how people can sometimes identify with emotions. Emotions are temporary. And then so you would think the advice would be, you should identify as happy and then you'll be happy. But, that's not entirely realistic. Like, we want to be happy most of the time. Yeah, but that is not really your identity, because there's times when you're not happy. And then if you think you have to tell yourself that you're happy all the time, and I'm only going to be happy and that's my identity, then you're going to feel an identity crisis in those times when you're not happy.
For sure. And then there's people that identify with the negative emotions because they've found a lot of attention from those identifications, right? They identify with being depressed, or they identify with needing help or being a victim. Now, I'm not saying there's not real victims out there, but there are people that have made a victim identity simply because it gets more people to show them support and attention.
Yeah. And in terms of identity, we were talking earlier about how two people can look the same, they can go through the same events, have basically the same life, but at the end of the day, they're two different people, two completely different people. So sometimes events that take place, we identify to feel a sense of unity and not being alone, right? But you can take that identification a little too far and let it seep into like your inner being. And that's what we're talking about as far as identifying and identity, because the events that take place are temporary, they're in our past, they do shape us into who we are, but there's something within you that starts at day one of your life that we're building upon until day zero, which is the end. And for an event to carry along with you through that journey is more often than not gonna be beneficial to you in developing your identity and understanding yourself, because again, it's gone, but it's occupying the space in my mind, and we keep feeling that it's so important when we don't even realize the potential for equal or more important events to take place tenfold after the fact, right?
Yeah, and a lot of the times you have to do that identity seeking. Some people call it soul searching. You have to kind of do that on your own time. And that's why we are all kind of at different levels of our comfortability with our identity and who we are. It's always been interesting to me because my dad is Black from Phoenix, Arizona, very intelligent Black man, understands the struggle and the history. My mom is a white woman from the South, from Texas, and lived in the South growing up. And so I was exposed to a lot of really great country music when I was younger and vibe into it from a little young age, because that's what my mom would play in the car. And I ended up liking Brad Paisley and Toby Keith and all these people. I enjoyed this music. And as I got older, there would be people that automatically would think that I was just like a hip hop listener and that I didn't vibe with country music, and it confused me because I was like, I knew my mom. So I was like, well, why would you think I don't? And then I'm like, oh, there's a way that people see me that is apart from how I actually understand myself and my family.
That was how other people were identifying you.
Exactly. And that was a little confusing growing up, I'm not going to lie, because I had such a supportive, loving white mom, but my school and everyone identified me as black. So then when I would get in conversations with maybe some more like radical level black people when I was growing up, and they would start talking to me about how like white people have done this and white people have done this, I'm like, well, my mom is dope. Like, I'll be like, you know, she's an amazing, loving person. So I kind of don't believe in this whole like we can be one thing because of our race, you know, mindset. I've never believed that because I grew up so mixed and seeing the love in every culture. It was hard for me to ever say like one people are bad because of what they look like.
Yeah, and it's a curse and a blessing because you could say, oh, you have the best of both worlds. Like you could fit in with both groups, right? But it doesn't often work that way. You know, you kind of have to choose one or the other if you want to be fully accepted.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's me just speaking from the observer standpoint, you know. And there's a lot of reasons to that because even if you were to identify as white, the majority of the world is still going to treat you like a black man.
Yeah, and no one would let me identify as white. I always thought that was
They would
funny.
look at you crazy.
Yeah, because I'm
it, right?
50-50, and I've had ethnicity options before that didn't give me the opportunity to choose more than one thing. And I'll be sitting there like, well, depending on what I'm doing, I might choose white or I might choose black. But I look crazy saying I'm white in America, even though I am half and half.
Yeah, and it's interesting because race clearly plays such a important role in all of our lives. Just look at history, right? But then even me, if you ask anybody, I'm gonna tell them I'm 100% black, like I'm full black. But oh, you know, if you want to get into the details, my dad's grandpa is full Native American. So if you want to do some, you know, division, adding, subtracting, and see what percentage I am, you can do that. But
For sure.
as far as my identity, I'm a black man. You know, I'm not getting government benefits from being Native American. I don't have any type of cultural exposure within my family to my Native American heritage. So we just have to be careful about identifying to our race.
Yeah,
because we're so much more than that.
for real. And I've definitely seen that being so strong about your identity and you know these words that you're calling yourself can definitely limit you, you know, because you asked the question, who are you? I don't really believe that I should use any physical characteristics to really try to label myself because I'm going to grow out of a lot of those things and none of them will be with me when I move on.
Right.
So,
You're going to grow out of basically all of those
all
things.
of them.
Yeah.
All of them.
And I'm glad you bring that up because, you know, me being in the fitness industry and coaching, when I first got into personal training, being around so many fit, healthy people that, I mean, technically are on the extreme of fitness, right? Being chiseled and having like a large body mass, muscle mass. That's how they identify. And I felt like I had to identify in that way to be able to fit into that industry, right? And then a lot of the clientele wants to identify as being large, muscular, healthy, but there's so much more to health than that, right? Muscles do not define health. And then I knew that as a nurse, but here I am within a certain environment where that's not really the mentality that people are going into it with, right? You ask people if they want to identify as being healthy or identify as looking good. Like, what's really going to be the priority between the two of those in the average person, right?
Yeah.
So what that did for me is I ended up pushing my efforts more into the nursing side just to see, one, where I could take my career, and then two, how I could make my coaching more tailored to what I believed in and what I was wanting to do. Because here I am wanting to be more of like a health coach or a nurse coach, as somebody would see, I guess, what credentialing for. But I was in a personal trainer role. And so
Yeah.
it didn't really fit in at the time. And so having that change in identity as far as my profession has been really beneficial to me and my clients, because my clients would tell me like, hey, I'm getting so much more out of this experience than just working out and looking good. Right.
Hmm.
And then I didn't market myself in that way because that's not how I was identifying myself within the professional realm.
For sure.
And then that takes me on to having, we identify in different ways in different settings sometimes, right?
Hmm.
And some people do not do that. And
Hmm.
it usually bites them in the butt. You need to be able to adapt to different situations, and that shouldn't change your identity as a human and your inner being, but how you're going to identify in that situation should change depending on the factors involved.
Yeah, that's one thing I always appreciated about like your social media presence as a trainer is because like you easily could have just tried to flex the strong man energy and like, yo, watch
Hmm.
me do these push-ups and everything and watch my
Hmm.
muscles, but you had the intelligence. So it's a paragraph with it with some real information that could
Hmm.
genuinely help people be healthy and expand in their life.
Right. And I'll be honest, I fell out of that for a little bit. There was a period where I was just posting stuff that was more to be impressive.
Mm,
And then I took that step back and I was like, oh, that's
mm,
not really what I got into this for. And
mm.
that's how I felt I needed to portray myself to be able to scale my business.
Yeah.
And I see that there's different niches for everybody, right? And
Hmm.
there's a lot of very successful people that fill that niche, but mine is always going to be health focused because focusing too much on the exterior and putting too much effort into that external appearance is going to take away some of the energy that you need to perfect the inner piece, which I think is extremely important, especially when you're talking about health, because the health is a lot more than the appearance.
For sure. And I honestly think that this whole concept of identity is why the phenomena of a midlife crisis still exists. You know, that's
Mm,
something that that people were dealing with in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s. They're going to keep dealing with it. I think it's because early on we cling to our identities and we cling to
mhm.
these physical things that describe us, and as we start to outgrow them, we get uncomfortable because we're like, dang, all these things I thought I was are starting to leave me and I don't feel as important. I need to go cling on to more things and add something else to my identity. And it's still not making me feel fulfilled. And
Right.
that usually hits us in that like midlife area.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
And I think a very similar experience happens to athletes a lot
Oh.
earlier because we put so much time and effort and thought and blood and sweat and tears into our sport, and we identify as an ex player, basketball
Mm-hmm.
player, football player, whatever sport you. That's how we identify when we're an athlete, right?
For sure.
So when you take that away, a lot of athletes ask themselves, "Who am I? Like,
Mm,
what am I supposed to do now?" You know,
mm,
and that's why you see people like Tom Brady that retire and then go back
mm-hmm.
because after they get out of it, they're like, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a football player. Like, what am I supposed to do in the regular world?" Right. And that's why it's so important for people to be aware and try to have a better understanding of their true identity before they get in a situation where something so fragile can be taken away from them.
Yeah.
Because whether it's an injury or age or you get in trouble, that happens sometimes too. A sport can be taken away at the blink of an eye, just like your physical ability or even your mind.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, we take it back to what do we truly appreciate, what makes us smile, what motivates us, and what is it special about me that I'm putting into the world that people can identify,
Mm-hmm.
right?
For sure. And, you know, one thing that will be with us is that ability to be creative. You know, it took me a while to understand that my growth in being a basketball player and all my successes really stemmed from my creative ability, right? Because I would
Mm,
go and practice, but I would create situations and try to mimic certain defenses, and I would learn to work at a pace that helped me be elite and successful. But that was from my creativity. A
mm-hmm.
lot of us, when we're done with our sport, we, like you said, don't know what's next, but we also don't recognize that we have to keep exercising our creative muscle, because that's what helped us be a successful athlete. And that's what's going to keep us away from the depths of despair as we're trying to navigate and figure out what's next.
Mm-hmm.
You can always be creative. That gets into a much deeper conversation. I believe that we're made in God's image. So I believe that we're
Right.
like little creative beings that need to exercise it to feel fulfilled and feel authentic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to take us down that path because when you think of creativity, who is more creative than the creator?
Exactly.
Right. And so for us to have the privilege, the opportunity, the ability, the capability to be creative, that should take you very close to a godlike level, right? And so when we appreciate God and we love God and we feel God, people say God's with us, he's with us. And I feel like God is in us. The creator is in us and allowing us to be creative so that we can create. Now the question is, what are you going to create? And for me, I try to create a positive energy. I try to create a safe environment. I try to create love and I try to share it as much as I can. And, you know, there's so many other things that I can create. But if I'm not creating those things as the basis, as the foundation, then a lot of the times the other things that I create don't really have the meaning or the purpose behind them that I would want. And that takes us, you know, into another little segment here of the relationship of purpose and identity. And I don't know. Do you feel like you know your purpose?
I feel like I know my purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And what would that be?
I feel like my purpose is to show love to this world.
Right.
To be honest, I feel like my purpose is to come into a physical world that can feel dense and dark, and to have a light and show that I have intention to detail with my light everywhere I go. So if I'm in Fry's or at work or at a Suns game or anywhere I'm at, like I feel like my purpose is to always be showing that like this light is possible in all these moments. And I've seen a lot of wild shifts happen around me when I'm being intentional with that, which is kind of a feedback system with me and God telling me like keep going, but it's hard to explain that to other people.
Yeah.
But this is why I feel like it's my purpose. You know what I mean? Because I see how easy it is to have like a stressful moment come into your life and try to dim what you have. You know what I'm saying? But we touched on, and the reason that I feel this way, like I was raised a lot by my grandma. Like she had a big part in raising me. We talked a couple episodes ago about how she was a widow, and she was always making sure that I thought about life in this like light way, that I thought about it from the soul and thought about it as like, your intelligence only takes you so far, but your soul is infinite. So I always felt like early on, this is why I wanted to study psychology, because I'm like, okay, if I can combine what I do with helping and showing love, I'll be successful. That still was from my ego. It took me till I got older to realize, oh, I could do anything with the intent to love, and it's going to be full of purpose. I could go sort boxes somewhere and do it with love, and I'm going to be walking in my purpose.
Yeah. And, you know, purpose, you can have more than one purpose, right?
Sure.
But people get so lost and caught up because they want their specific purpose. I think you gave me a general purpose, which I love because I have a similar general purpose.
Okay.
And I'm more than one purpose.
Yeah.
But some people get really caught up on not knowing their specific purpose. And a lot of times we attribute our purpose to our profession. And I've come to terms with the fact that I'm so much more than a nurse. I'm so much more than a coach or a personal trainer. Like who I am within me, you could take away all the jobs, all of the accolades, all of the everything, all the material things gone. I'm still going to be me, and I'm still going to operate in the same way with whatever resources I have and whatever environment I'm in. And having that mindset has allowed me to stay true to myself in a lot of different situations, and then also be respected by other people for doing that. And it's not always easy to be yourself in certain situations, especially some of the morbid, grim situations that I deal with. But every single time, people are so appreciative that I'm just honest, and I'm true to myself, and I'm true to other people. And just last week, it was interesting. my hospital just had this great big expansion. So I'm interacting with a lot of new people. And I just recently went to day shift too. So I'm still getting acquainted in that way as well. There was a dialysis nurse working on my patient, and I had two patients. So I was kind of bouncing back and forth, and they both had visitors, family members there. And the dialysis nurse said to me when I come in, he's like, Blake, everybody likes you, huh? And I was like, like, that was a strange question to me. I was like, nobody's ever asked me that in my life.
Sure.
And I was like, I don't know what makes you ask me that. He was like, well, the family is in here talking about you while you're gone, and the patient was like really excited that you came back, and everyone seems like they trust you, and you seem to put a smile on their face. And I was like, oh dang. I can't speak for everybody, but I'm glad that these people here right now like me.
Yeah, right.
You know, and one way that I like to identify is being a likable person. I feel like I've identified in that way for a very long time, since I was young, and I have to give credit to my parents for that. We've talked on one of our other podcasts about how important it is to try to shape your children into likable people. And that's not caring about what other people think about you, but just doing unto other people what you would like to have done to you, right? Treating other people as you want to be treated. Though some of those basic principles that we learn as children are so vital to our success later in life. And sometimes we just get so caught up on cramming all these other topics and information in that we forget the basics, right?
Yeah.
And the foundation is so important, because if the foundation is weak, then the house is going to crumble. So you can build as much as you want, but you have to remember some of those important things that you learn early in life. And some of the elderly people that I've interacted with that seem so happy and seem so content with where they are in life, that are in their 90s, and even a video I saw earlier today of a lady that was 106 years old. Their key to happiness is not taking life seriously. Like they have this childlike view of the world almost, because they've been through so much, and they've seen so much death and despair and hatred, but they've also seen so much love and so much positivity, and they've seen the balance between the two, and they've seen what happens if you focus too much on the negative. And it's a very, very I would say consistent response when you ask elderly people what the secret is. Like, you see somebody really old, oh, what's the secret? You know, same way you ask somebody if they've had a long marriage, what the secret is. And I'll tell you that all the secret is love.
Yeah, man.
Every single time, 10 out of 10. If you focus on love, you prioritize love, you share love, you acknowledge love, you appreciate love, then you're going to thrive in whatever you do. And that might not necessarily mean that you're going to live a long life, because a lot of stuff can happen in between. But then that also takes you to, if your life were to end tomorrow, how do you want to be remembered? How do you want people to identify you, right?
For sure. Like, they told me a lot when I was growing up that God is love. I think that it's interesting that we both said, talked back to our upbringing when we started to get into a conversation about what our purpose is, and
our identity,
right? Yeah. And I think that just has a lot of like powerful inspiration for people to understand, like, that family unit, being able to kind of be there for one another and guide each other in the right direction is so important to us. Even if you have like a young person that wants to act like it's not, I guarantee you, even like the person showing like the most harshest behaviors and showing that they don't want love and guidance, they still want it. It's like we all want to be in this group.
It's natural. It's a natural instinct.
I'm really glad you also brought up like that, the childlike feeling of being creative, because I was talking about the athletes, how when they're done playing, they can feel like they don't have much purpose because they're not clinging to their creativity anymore. I mean, I've seen some people with the harshest life circumstances play basketball and look like a 4-year-old, just giggling and like, you know, having so much fun with other grown men. And they just are in this bubbly spirit for the time being that they're playing. And I love seeing that, because it reminds me of the origin, and it reminds me of like our true light. But I don't know how aware everyone is that that type of energy needs to be manifested in your life consistently, because you really need to reach back and touch back to that child inside of you, because that child saw the world with wonder. That child didn't already know how to identify everything, so they got to live more free. We grow up and learn the words to identify and categorize, and it diminishes our perception of the world.
And that's, again, when you put a label on something, in a way, you're limiting. We talked about love languages 2 weeks ago, and to have 5 love languages, to me, that's limiting to label love, because love is love. Love is vast. Love is everywhere. I'm not going to get into that. That's a little too deep right now. But identity, man, we talked about, how significant identification and developing an identity is in the childhood years. So I'm going to ask you again, is identity discovered or developed?
You know, is identity discovered or developed? I think that, see, this is the thing. If I didn't grow up in the society that labeled me all these things, I wouldn't think this about myself. So it's hard for me to think that there's some type of objective identity that I was going to come in with. I think the only thing that objectively identifies me is my soul, which is like everything physical shedded away.
He said it. I knew he'd say it. I knew it. Yeah. That's my boy. Yes, yeah. The soul. The soul is part of our identity. When we talk about our inner identification, our inner human being, what else is there than our soul? That can't be measured, that can't be observed, that only we really know about. And we can share it as much as we want. But at the end of the day, you know your soul. Your soul is within you. Right. So it's so important. I mean, the soul is undeniable. The soul's there from day one, even as we're born and we're learning and everything's new. You could say that, I guess, a soul is pure and it's starting with a clean slate, but there's something there that's not going to change over time. Right. So we're born with something, but there is so much building and development that's involved as well when it comes to our identity. And I just think that the soul is the nucleus of the identity. Yes. And so many people don't care for their soul. They don't acknowledge their soul. Some people don't believe in their soul, but I'm here to tell you, you have a soul, whether you like it or not. Oh, sue me. But sue me. I'm just saying, man, what else could there be like for us to truly have any purpose in this world? The purpose is there for you to determine. But I think if you do some introspection and do some soul searching, then that purpose is going to present itself to you rather than you feeling like you have to fight to go find it.
Yeah, man. And I'm so glad you said that, because you talk about cutting off your dreads. That's gone now. That's you no longer. Being young, youthful, having the big muscles, all these things, fleeting. But that soul, that is the consistent variable that's going to be with us, like you said, birth throughout your whole life. And in my belief, it's infinite. Like I'm going to have this forever. And this is why a lot of my practices is me trying to get in touch with my soul. You know what I mean? Because I want to learn more about it before I'm forced to learn about it. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of people, like, when they start to learn or face their mortality and it's becoming like tomorrow or soon, that's usually where they start to feel like, okay, wow, everything that's on me that's physical is going away.
Right. And then so again, holding on to things that are in the past, eventually that's going to hinder your performance. That's going to hold you back from really being able to understand who you are and know how to operate in the true version of yourself, right? Yeah. So the hair's gone. LeBron, one of the greatest to ever play the game of basketball, he's holding on to his hair. I would have shaved my head bald if I was him.
Yeah, might as well.
But yeah, you might as well, right? You have all these other things to be grateful for. That's nothing. People might talk about you. You might look different, but those are things that we have to accept at some point. I know older guys that, they want to either have testosterone injections, which is okay if your levels are out of whack, but some people want to take their levels through the roof so they can look like the baddest MF in town. And then they might even do anabolic steroids on top of it. And that's just so detrimental to your body, especially if you're not going to be competing and you just want to look good to look good. That's not part of the journey. That's not going to develop you and your identity, and you trying to hold on to something that's supposed to be gone is going to catch up to you, whether it's mental issues, heart issues, joint issues, trying to do things that are not in line with where you are in life. Will not benefit you. And so people could argue, well, I feel good, I'm performing well. Again, Tom Brady. People say he should have retired. He's still was successful in his last couple of years, right? He
Yeah.
could have retired 10 years ago and nobody would have blamed him for it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's again the thing that you need to understand within you and your identity,
Mm-hmm.
because people are going to try to identify you in all types of ways for your entire life. But you need to know your identity. And at the end of the day, you're probably not going to be able to explain that identification to everyone else.
Yeah.
They're going to continue to identify you however they perceive you. All of us perceive things differently. We all have different biases in our minds. So we can do our best to portray and give off the energy that we want, because me and you, we prioritize love, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
think that most of the people that have interacted with me know that I come from a place of love. And if they don't, I tell them, but they still might not understand at the end of the day. Some people are still not going to agree with me or know that I'm coming at them with good intention,
Mm-hmm.
because that's just the world we live in. People are defensive and it takes a lot to trust one another. So
Mm-hmm.
you need to at least do yourself the favor of being confident of what's going inside within yourself. And that
Mm-hmm.
takes time, that takes effort, that takes energy.
Yeah. And, even though, I find a lot of value and just, pride in studying Black history, but at the same time, I only want to identify with it for so long because I'm here in the present.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I'm in a new frontier, something that isn't history. Like I'm
Yeah.
now. So even though I do enjoy learning these things, I only take it so far as to how I think about myself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that there is a very key detail. A lot of people try to teach about Malcolm X and they'll say that, he's like an American radical civil rights leader. But in his book, he talks about when he takes his actual Hajj to Mecca, he goes to the Middle East to pray because he's Muslim in his religion. He goes to the Middle East to pray. And when he got there, dude, he saw people that were black, brown, yellow, white, all worshiping in the same place. And he said in his autobiography, the autobiography of Malcolm X, he said that it changed his whole mind to what this identity even is, because he saw white men with blue eyes and the darkest people he could see and all the way in between. All one loving and worshiping together. And he realized that his upbringing in North America conditioned him to think of identity different than where most of the world thinks about it. He's like, this heavy physical toll and placement that we have on race is not what we are.
Right. No, even, I mean, I am proud to be a Black man, but at the end of the day, I'm a Black man because I live in America, right? I'm African American. If I had never, my lineage never ended up in America, who knows what I would label myself as, right? And that's why, these terms are used loosely. Like, I identify myself, I belong to this group of Black people. I'm proud of it, but there is so much more within me that has nothing to do with my race. And, you can take that how you want, because yes, the Black history has shaped who I am, and it's shaped who my family is and how we operate and where we are in life. And yes, that history is within my DNA, and it has affected how I've been able to live my life and my lineage, and it's going to continue to carry on down the line. But there's different aspects when it comes to the term identity. Am I going to identify with something that people already have an idea of behind it? Or am I going to identify with the unique individual that is within me that nobody else can replicate and that you haven't ever seen before unless you've seen me, right?
Exactly. And I think that that's our key frustrations out here, dude. I feel like it's our key frustration is that people are trying to label and identify us before they get to know us or before they really understand what in psychology it's a term called idiosyncratic, right? And that means that every single person has their own way of seeing, viewing, and talking about this world. If you sit down and do psychotherapy with people, you see how amazing human beings are, because everybody has a different perspective, a different vibe, and a different thing to add to this gumbo of humanity.
And different goals, different priorities, different experiences. We're all living different lives, and we have to respect one another for that, not hate on each other for it, not show fear towards one another for being different. That doesn't make any sense. We can't expect the person next to us to have any understanding of what we've gone through. Like we've talked about this before too. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we try to be empathetic, but I only know as much as you tell me about you and what you've been through. You only know as much as I tell you. And there's some aspect of what's within us that is kind of secretive, right?
Mm-hmm.
That only we know about. And
Mm-hmm.
it's up to you to be comfortable with that secret piece of yourself that
Yeah.
you might not ever really share with someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was always enthralled growing up with like Egyptian architecture, of the ancient Egyptian architecture, because I was always just so fascinated that they made these pyramids that were so grand and with all these paintings, hieroglyphics, and amazing things. And then as I start to get older and read about the philosophy of these people, I was like, oh my gosh, they are literally trying to teach us about their perspective of the journey of the soul. A lot of these hieroglyphs are telling what they believed was the journey the soul goes through.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just so interesting to think you can go back 5,000 years, 8,000 years, and you're going to find people that were still understanding that you can only identify with the soul,
Mm-hmm.
right? That is one of the dopest things that my mind's able to think about, because it's like I'm here way later with the same dilemma. Do I identify with the physical, or do I go ahead and just think that I'm this soul going through
Mm-hmm.
another journey to the light?
Yeah. And then, you know, it's all about balance, right? Because you as a physical form is important. You have to take care of your physical body so
Mm,
that the inner body can thrive. Because if you neglect this body that we're in, this vessel, then everything else is going to crumble within it. That's just how it works. You need a healthy mind, body, spirit, and a balance between the three. So,
mm,
you know, we talk about that spiritual piece in our identification, but you still have to take care of the body,
mm.
where we don't really want you to identify with the body, but that doesn't mean that you should neglect the body, because
Sure.
the body's the shell, the body's the protection, the body's the transportation of your soul, right? That's how we're moving through and sharing whatever gift we have to share with the world.
Yeah.
And for us to not take care of this car that is driving the individual, right? You treat your body like a car. You're going to wax it, you're going to wash it, you're going to put premium gas in there so you can run efficiently. And then that's so that the person inside stays safe and gets to the destination. But you let that car fall apart, that person's going to sit right where they are and they're never going to get to the point that they want to get to.
Mm. I've had a lot of conversations with homeless people. I've gone to California, like Venice Beach area. I've been Skid Row area. I've gone to these places and had conversations with people. Almost spent my whole vacation almost talking to homeless people. And I've definitely talked to some people that feel like they can completely neglect the physical, and that they're on this super spiritual journey, and that's what led them to almost denounce everything physical, and their hygiene is actually like terrible,
Yeah.
and they haven't
Yeah.
been taking care of themselves.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can look at someone like Dick Gregory, who,
Mm,
you know, take on some strange dietary practices, and even Steve Jobs take on strange dietary practices in the search of spirituality. Um, and that is a way to develop your spirit, yes, but they will also share with you how difficult that is and how
mm.
taxing it is, and it can end your journey early.
Yeah, I believe that. I
Right.
believe that. And I think that that is can still be ego. It's funny because as you start to try to get into these spiritual, soulful conversations, a lot of times we can find ourselves still operating from our ego,
Mm-hmm.
because we want to basically identify with the process that made us spiritual. You know what I'm saying? It's like that's
Mm,
still a physical identity. If you want to say that, oh, I did this to become spiritual, or I
mm,
followed this route to become spiritual, now
mhm.
you're basically speaking from your ego now.
Yeah, yeah. But I've also mentioned on here before that I think in the society we live in today, you do have to acknowledge the ego and feed into it
Mm,
to an extent. If you're going to be
sure.
like a normal player in this
Okay.
game, you know. I think if you want to go on that solo journey that we've talked about a lot of people doing, because it's perfectly fine,
Yeah.
they might be able to achieve something as an individual that they wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. But if I'm going to go on this journey with an intention of spreading the love and helping other people walk a similar journey and discover themselves and continue to help the rest of their community do the same, then I have to have some level of empathy and understanding that I think is a little bit derived from that ego piece.
Bro, I love
you
it.
know?
And you're right. And that's how you're able to lead, and that's how you're able to bring more people into a
Yeah.
healthy vibe. So let me ask you this. What things do you feel like as an ego you identify with? Like what kind of
Um, you know, so I identify as a dad, right? I take a
mm,
lot of pride in being a dad now. That somebody could argue that, my family is not me, right? But
mm,
I take a lot of pride in my family. I take a lot of pride in my name. Like Blake
mm,
Jones, that's strong to me.
mm,
And so I guess a piece of that would be ego related, because people like Malcolm X, they get rid of their name
sure.
because that's not them. That's not their identity,
Yeah.
especially with the slave ties. Because we know with the Jones plantation, my family came from Mississippi, so you can fill in all the blanks you want.
Right.
uh, if I really wanted to be me without the history attached, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I go by Blake X, right?
Mm-hmm. I've thought
But
about that too.
I'm going to embrace those pieces of my past
Sure.
and the journey that's come after, and pay respect to my ancestors who took on the name Jones and accomplished great things and allowed me to be here today. That's how I look at that. So there's a little ego attachment to my name, I
Mm-hmm.
guess you could say.
Mm,
Um, I have not done the research to truly know the origin of my lineage,
mm-hmm.
and that's I guess a privilege that a lot of white people, I don't think, take into consideration. They go say, oh, I'm Irish, I'm Italian, I'm this. I don't know what country in Africa I'm from. You could say I'm
Man.
African, but Africa's not a country, people. There's a whole lot of countries within Africa, in case you didn't know. So even that, like, I'm interested in knowing what country my family is from so I could know that piece of my heritage. But at the end of the day, it's in the past. And I know that my current culture is completely different than my African culture was, because now I'm an African American. I'm a black male.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you want to identify, right?
Yeah.
Really, any piece of identification and you trying to explain it out loud is probably going to have some ego attached to it, because how else are you really going to let someone know the details of your soul? I haven't
Man.
figured out how to do that.
Such a great point. I've also used kind of more of my ego identities to kind of reorient myself, because I identify as being a fast learner. In
Mm-hmm.
my mind, I'm a fast learner, but really what it is that I'm down to sit for like 10 hours and focus on one thing.
Mm-hmm.
I almost feels like a superpower to me, dude. At first it manifested in me having an elite jump shot in America, but now I've taken it and I'm just like, wow, I'm able to sit and focus. Now, that could be my ego identifying with that, but I use it to my advantage. And I usually point back to it when I'm trying to convince someone that I should be someone they should hire or use
Mm-hmm.
resources on to let me get a job done,
Yeah.
because I know how to do these things.
Yeah. And you saying that you're a fast learner is definitely the ego piece.
Mm-hmm.
But you could just make the general statement of I'm I'm a student, right?
Sure.
There's no ego
But
behind that,
I
is
feel
there?
like I feel like I'm a what would be the word? A gifted student. Like I feel like I'm
Right.
more in that
But
I
that's
have.
certainly ego behind it. You wanting to put an adjective on it
Mhm.
to make it a little more elevated, right?
Exactly. And I'm trying to talk about how I use that ego identity for my benefit. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying? And then
Yeah.
I try to convince kids that it's possible as well. And this is one thing I've learned, man, because I work with a lot of different counselors. I work with psychologists. I work with people that are trying to like reach youth to get them to reorient into a better way. Some of my most profound breakthroughs with kids is when I go outside and cash 10 threes in a row. And they're looking at me like, what the heck, bro? I've been trying to make a layup for 3 years and you just made 10 40-footers like it was nothing. And then
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, now let's start talking.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to show you first, bro. But what it takes is this certain type of discipline and focus, which we all have. We all
Mhm.
have the ability to focus, but we all have a billion distractions. So it's like,
Mhm.
now let's talk
Mhm.
about how we're gonna compartmentalize our attention.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like one of my clients almost I would say like every other time we meet up to train, he's like, "All right, let's race." I'm like, "Bro,
All
why
right.
you want to race? Like, one, I'm faster than you.
Uh-huh.
Two, what's the point?" And he's like, "Ah, no, I think I'm faster than you now." I'm like, "All right, bro. I like old man, get over." I'm like, "Let me stretch real quick, not trying to pull nothing." And I tell him every time, the only reason I'm faster than him is because I have the technique.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much behind technique and whatever it is that you're doing, and that
Mm.
takes a long time to develop because my running technique is a lot better now than it was when I was actually a competitive athlete.
Yeah, man.
But I'm more efficient with my running, right? And the same thing when it comes to weightlifting. I'm telling him like all the form and stuff, and then he's like, "How much do you bench?" I'm like, "I don't know. I don't care how much I bench. Like, I know I can at least bench what you're doing." So,
For real, for real.
but
Man.
yeah, sometimes you do have to like pull the ego out of your bag and show
Mm-hmm.
them, like, "Look, this is waiting here, but I'm not trying to use it in this situation,
Yeah,
right?
man.
Because there's a lot more to this, and it doesn't really matter."
Mm-hmm.
And that takes a while for people to be able to realize and recognize that because I've seen coaches, especially younger coaches, that have recently been athletes to where they feel like they got to show off for the
Mm.
kids to respect them and listen to them, and they jump at those opportunities. But really, in my opinion, those aren't the individuals that ultimately gain the most respect from these kids.
Yeah.
And it's maybe because they end up getting looked at more like a peer.
Mm-hmm.
And that just takes balance as well because you do want the kids to trust you, and sometimes that peer role does get you that trust a lot easier, and then they listen to you in a way. But kids will push boundaries; they're bound to,
For sure.
and you just have to be ready for that if that's the approach that you want to take.
Yeah. And one thing I've kind of learned also is that when you go too hard of being like a peer to the people you're trying to lead, then once you get into the trenches, it gets confusing. Because once you get into those
Mm,
trenches, we need a clear leader. And that clear
mm,
leader usually has to demand respect. And,
yeah.
and that comes from separating yourself. Because, I train staff that works with kids, and
Hmm.
I see all the time the staff that wants to be homies. And I try to tell them, like, hey, that's cool. And I know how it feels because I've been there. But when it hits the fan, bro, you're going to not want to just be a homie. You need to be a leader because
Hmm.
you're the one who's
Hmm.
leading. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So it's interesting. And I know it's hard to develop that balance
Oh
too. I
yeah.
know it's hard.
And I've seen in the hospital too, like doctors have a lot of different personalities. There's very like short and straight to the point doctors that don't want to joke around at all, and then there's doctors that are really fun and they like to laugh and educate in a different way. And I'm always impressed by those individuals because they all get it together in those times where they have to perform, right?
Hmm.
And those boundaries are always there. But I can see sometimes if you come down the ranks in the hierarchy and maybe you're like a nurse manager role or a charge nurse, I think that they can often feel like a peer because they oftentimes came from that same role of the people that they are leading. So
Hmm.
it's not always easy to transition into that, or people know you as something else. So they're still interacting with you in the way that they were when you were their side by side peer rather than now you're their superior,
Right.
right? So I have seen the lines get blurred in that way. And sometimes it takes a little bit of discomfort to get people to realize that there needs to be a different level of professionalism. And that's why I
Facts.
try to always come correct with the professionalism in the workplace so that those lines never have to be redrawn, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm ready to move up to the next level. And I think that the people around me are too. And I don't have to worry about their thinking that I'm still going to be buddy buddy because at the end of the day, we're at work and there's
Hmm.
lives at stake, and it needs to be the main focus at all times, in my opinion.
Yeah, man. And that's a key right there. And one of our earlier conversations was about relationships. And I think this conversation matters so much because people will say things like, wow, this person really knows themselves. Like, wow, I'm able to work well with you because you're so comfortable with yourself. And I always really think about, what does that mean? You know,
Mhm.
does that mean that my physical identities, I understand them? Or does it mean that since I am trying to kind of shed the more physical identifications, that you see some more peaceful part of me? It's always been hard for me to understand that, because the reason I'm going to bring this back to the relationships is because usually when people are in a relationship with someone and they start to misidentify what they believe about themselves, it gets tricky. I'll try to give an example. Like, if you feel like you're a very caring person and you're like, wow, I'm really good at being there for others, and then your partner or your friend tries to tell you, hey, you know, you're really distant and you just don't really take into consideration other people's feelings. Well, you identified with being caring for all the time up until you met them.
Mhm.
And that's usually where people now have a huge rift, because it's like, whoa, you don't agree with my identities that I have, though.
Right.
We can't talk.
I've been there.
Man, and it's a difficult place, but I think that the correct and mature way to view it is, dude, none of these identities are truly you. You got to keep going. You got to keep flowing and like let the world break off what you don't need and move you in the direction towards where you're going. Because our identities, I feel like, are baggage. You know, I feel like when people say you have a lot of baggage, put your bags down. I feel like that metaphorical baggage is things we identify with.
Yeah, so like I said, my uh identity and my process of developing and understanding it has started from, day one, in my opinion. But I have vivid memories of being a young boy and going through certain experiences, doing certain things that have clearly also played a, influential role in that. And so when I was in college, I had a close friend. I'll never forget this. And, we're cool now, but we fell out a little bit after this situation where she told me that I was choosing friends and popularity over my relationship with God. And I
Mm,
was like, whoa, what are you saying to me? And it like really got in my head because I was like, what? Why would she say that? Like, what am I doing wrong? But then I came to the conclusion, like, she doesn't know my relationship with God. Like,
mm,
I can't even think to this day what I did to make her think to say something like that. But I was like greatly offended because that's sacred. I'm like, that's my relationship with God. Who are you to tell me that? So
mm.
I did think about it for a while, and it was just a personal thing. And you have to realize when people say stuff like that, it's personal, and you can try to empathize with them and understand why they feel that way. But um, your relationship with the higher power is your relationship that nobody else is ever going to understand or see, the same way that they can't see your soul, because those are tied right hand in hand with each other, right?
Mm.
So I would just invite you to become familiar with your soul and your inner being, and also become confident in that familiarity, because somebody's going to challenge it eventually. And
Mhm.
it might be somebody that's close to you, and that can feel really bad when it happens. But
Man.
you have to be prepared, because again, you're going to be misinterpreted at some point in your life. And then, God willing, you'll reel it back in and everybody can get back on the same page. But if it doesn't work out that way, that's okay, because that's you and your relationship with yourself.
Yes, and it's very important to know that nobody can gain you access to your soul or take it away from you. It's
Mm,
very important. You know, they talk about the history of the church, where they used to tell people like, "Hey, if you pay this amount of tithes, then we'll pray for you and get you into heaven." You
mm,
know, that's some of the history. They really used to do that. Like, you have to go through us to be able to get to heaven, because we have to pray for you, or we have to interpret
yeah.
the Bible for you to understand these things. And that's one of the oldest tricks for people to use to try to get you away from your authentic power. They can't tell you about your soul, and they can't give you access to the greater things. Like, this is all your personal journey.
Hmm.
And I believe that opens up when you start to go on that route. But I honestly can't imagine how that had to feel like in the 1400s, in these old churches where they were telling people that they had to go through certain things to get prayed for to get to heaven.
Hmm.
I don't even understand, because I'm so far away from that belief. But I do
Hmm.
know that nowadays there are people that try to scare people out of their riches, so to say, scare people out of their destiny by telling them that they have something evil inside of them, or that they are doing something that's detrimental to a more abstract place, like you're saying. I think that that's kind of a facet of evil, to be honest, to try to get us to be confused about who we are.
Yeah. And that can get pretty deep on that topic, but just make sure you're seeking the proper guidance of whatever it is that you want to do or build upon. And just know that whatever is within you is waiting to be unleashed and loved upon. And it's something special, regardless of what it looks like. And we don't expect you to tell us what it looks like, because you can't. Whatever it is beautiful. And I'm grateful for it. So you should be too. And I'm grateful for you all joining us today in this conversation on identity.
Yeah, man. And you made me think when you said that, like, you can't say it, but you can vibe with us. You know what I'm saying? You might not be able to tell us, but you can vibe with us, because these are sound waves, and guarantee that we appreciate and recognize the soul in us. So I'm sure your soul is vibing as well.
And if you vibed with us today, please like, subscribe, share with one person. I just want you to share with one person if you got anything out of this today. We greatly appreciate it. And we just want to build our community and get more minds involved. And with that being said, we do have a guest series coming soon. So watch out for that in case you're tired of hearing us talk. You shouldn't be tired, though, because I sound pretty good on the mic. I think Russ sound all right, too.
Man, and everybody who's giving me feedback says they are vibing with the conversations we have. They love the topics. They love seeing us just be young, confident, competent, and walking in our destiny. And I feel that. I feel the same way.
Yeah. So thank you guys again. And thank God for the opportunity for us to be here for another episode of R&B Podcast with Russ and Blake. And we will see you next week.
Thank you, God. Peace.
Peace.